Truth Talks. Please, I'm excited about the Truth Talks. They are addressing true fellowship and what it means, what true fellowship and corporate worship looks like according to the Bible.
I will sing to the old rugged cross, and exchange it someday for a crown.
All right. So to pick back up where we left off, we can do a quick recap of where we was at. So when we left Jerusalem last, right? Or the beginning when we left Israel last, because we haven't really established the kingdom of Jerusalem yet. When we left it last, Samuel was kind of telling the people, this is what you want. This is what you're asking for. He laid down all the rules, all the things that they had to deal with in having a king. Now, keep this in mind as we go forward. These rules that Samuel was given, they weren't from Samuel. We all know where they were from, right?
Oh, God.
Because the same thing that was required of them, it's still the same requirements. It's just they asked for a go-through. They asked for an additional step when they had Samuel. Prior to them asking for a king, they could have went straight to Samuel. Now they have to hearken to the words of the king. And Samuel is still there to guide him. All right, that's the role of the priest and the king. And we do know later on Christ came and he fulfilled all those roles at the same. They talk about that in Hebrews, how Christ is the king, how he is a priest, how he is a judge. So you see how all of those roles are in one, but as history goes on, you'll see how they start to break them down, how they become more man-driven as opposed to led by the Spirit. We hear all the prophets, but keep in mind at the same time, other prophets and priests were still involved in that. They still were there at that time. So, and it's a lot of the books that comes from this, I always call it the conquest of the kings or the story of the kings. There's a lot of prophets start intertwined in the king's books that when you go back and you read read those prophets' books, you'll see that they were talking about them as they transitioned from this the nation of Israel to the kingdom of Israel to going into bondage. I just brought that up because right here is the start of that conversation. The start of all that. So Saul picks a new king. Now, I mean Samuel. Oh, you got me, Pastor King. You got me doing that. Saying Saul and Samuel, getting my asses all twisted up. So when we left Samuel last time,
Leave it alone.
right? When we left. I think it might be even easier. We say when we left the judge last time, there it is. He was talking to the king. That way I won't get him twisted up. No, but when we left Samuel last time, Samuel was basically telling the Israelites just that. Now, when Samuel, damn, I'm just pulling them all in, man. When Samuel pulled them all together, he actually had all the tribes' heads there. And I point that out because later on, when Saul starts to make decisions, a question comes up. All right, so they're begging for a king. The nation of Israel is begging for a king. So let's get into that. The selection of the king. All right, so this next chapter deals with that. I'm summarizing, but if we want to go to the text, if it's something particular you want to point out and grab, there are things that I pointed out, but I'm always willing to hear because that's how we grow. What did you find? Because this is what I found. All right, so we got Saul's lineage. Saul's lineage from the beginning starts at his father. It tells his father's lineage, and then it gets into who Saul is. Now, before I start to describe Saul and tell you who he was, we have to talk about what Saul was originally out doing. Now, Saul was supposed to be out doing something for his father. Anybody remember what that was?
Looking for the donkeys.
Looking for the donkeys.
That ain't exactly what they said, but the donkeys.
Looking for the donkeys. All right. And while Saul was out looking for the donkeys, it's him and let's say a servant or a friend. All right. And they're out on this conquest for it. And as they're looking for him, they come across and they realize we can't find it. We can't complete what needs to be done. In the process, they look and they say, well, since we can't find it, his friend comes up with a grand idea, or Saul comes up with a grand idea, or contemplate both of them. They say, hey, let's go see the man of God. In those days, they called him what? A seer.
Seer.
Because a seer was somebody who saw what was coming. Somebody, they looked at those who judged, they knew because God told them, hey, y'all are going to go over there and we're going to give you victory. You saw victory before it happened. I want you to take the mindset of the Israelites at that time and just think about that one concept, seeing victory happening and believing in it. Isn't that kind of the premises of what Christ is telling us to do? See the victory, believe the victory, and walk in the victory. That's what the Israelites did in the days of Egypt, all of the different battles they fought. So it was the same concept. So when they say a seer, it's somebody who knows the things that are coming. Well, at that time, Saul was like, well, we don't have anything to take. Have anything to take to the seer. So what did they end up doing? What was the plan devised? That's shekel. All right.
1/4 of the shekel of silver.
1/4 of a shekel.
1/4.
And end up taking that 1/4 of the shekel and taking it up there and bought some bread because they couldn't go to the seer empty-handed. It was not common in Israel to go and see the seer or the prophet with empty hands. So they did that. Got their bread and went to see the prophet. But when they got there, was he there?
Nope.
Oh, see, and the thing about when I read about when I read the Kings, Samuel's always coming up on God's time. It's never the person whose time that's supposed to be there. Saul went to the thing and was like, hey, a seer is supposed to be here. We're going to get the answer about my father's donkeys. Samuel wasn't there. But when Samuel came up, Samuel saw him and said, hey, you're the one that God told me about. And what was Saul's response?
The first Saul asked, says, you the seer, have you seen the seer? He said, I am the seer. Please go over here and wait at such and such place.
So he told Saul to go. And when where he sent Saul, go ahead.
He's sitting there, but he also, in the meantime, he tells him your donkeys have been found.
Yep. The task that your father has sent you out has already been done. It's been completed. You are on a next task, one that you didn't even know that you were going to embark upon. You came looking for one thing, and this is now your new mission. So Saul being Saul, still wouldn't know what's going on. He told Saul to go in, and he set Saul at the best place at the table. Now, this was the time of a feast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the village was making their sacrifice as Saul was making his round. Now, it was an empty seat there. Nobody, can you imagine having an empty seat somewhere? And nobody knows what this seat is for. And a man who's not from around that area, not familiar with the people, he comes in and it's not just any seat. It's the best seat in the house. And they tell him to sit there. What do you think Saul's reaction was? His mindset. Not worthy. What you got? Not worthy, right? And I mean, if you think about it in a sense of we all get put in that seat. Every believer initially takes a seat in that seat. We're sitting in the grand hall of Christ. We're not starving. We know the veil has been lifted for us. We get to eat. We get to drink and of the nourishment of Christ. But can you understand just how we were? Saul was. But his story was so much more. He still couldn't fathom it because Israel was going through what Israel was going through. They had the Philistine oppression. They had the Amorites. They still had people that were oppressing them. So even this feast, Saul sitting there is like, what's going on? Because he didn't know. Now, you would think that Saul would have been aware of the request of Israel. But do you think he was aware, or was it was just something that didn't get down to him? I'm making this easy. But he had a one-track mind. And and finding them donkeys was doing what his father told him to, which was honorable in those days. If you go out and you do something, you didn't come home till the mission was complete. But Saul was out there and he was supposed to do it on his own.
Mm-hmm.
Saul was supposed to be out there seeking it on his own. Huh? Yeah, but he didn't. He decided to go get help, right? He was supposed to find. Can you imagine your parents telling you to go look for something and you come back and be like, yo, I'm gonna go ask my sister, can you help me find this? That's what happened.
He's been out there a while too.
Yes.
And said, wait a minute, this is not working. That's
It's
basically
not.
what he was saying. Okay, but it was interesting that as before that is his reply to Samuel when Samuel told him in verse 21, his reply to Samuel after 20 it says, and as for the donkeys, they wandered off 3 days ago. Do not be concerned about them, for they have been found. And for whom is everything that is desirable is Israel. It is not for you or for all, it's not for you or for all your father household. Why would he reply what he replied? Next verse says Saul replies, am I not a Benjamite?
So we talked a little bit about that last time, right? Why did Saul reply, am I not a Benjamite?
Because he explains it in this verse at the same time. He says, of the smallest of the tribes of Israel, and I found the least of all the families of the tribe of Benjamin. Why then should have you spoke to me in this way?
Why is it important that Saul asked those questions, especially what we just learned in the Judges? Why Saul being picked? Kind of a big deal for Israel.
But you have to also,
It was an expression of his humility.
humility.
It was this person, but why is that question so important for Israel? Specifically, the tribe of Benjamin.
About that last week about how they were the smallest of the small.
They almost got wiped out.
Yeah, they almost got wiped out by their own people.
By their own people.
So it don't matter, quantity doesn't matter when it comes to God's will and purpose in people's lives. It doesn't matter how famed you are, fortunate you are, large or small. What God has anointed and called for a specific reason, it will stand. And it's interesting that the same terminology that is used for the priest, for Saul in the first meeting, because people say, well, it was Israel's desire to have a king. True, the scriptures say that, but the scriptures also say that God was their king. But people like to move God out of the way, like he wasn't sovereign in that, because it was meant, he allowed for Saul, for that lot to fall on that tribe and drop down to, I think it's M-A-N, whatever that is. And then I don't know if I'm in your notes or not.
No, you good.
But for Saul to be selected, the same terminology of anointing is referred to those groups of people in the Old Testament as it is when it says the Christ.
Right.
So it doesn't speak specifically of Christ or those entities, PD, but it speaks of God's selection, and his sovereign selection in things.
And that's why I mentioned last week about Saul and the Benjamites. Remember, the Benjamites, for them to pick someone not only out of the Benjamites, not only of the Benjamites of all the clans, the smallest one. It is saying that in those years of building up, remember the Benjamites almost got wiped out. They were what, 6,000 men, 6,000 or 600? Somewhere around there. We go back. We'll take a look. Six something. But they almost got wiped out. So this small number over time, it grew.
Yes.
But think about the intricate parts of the tribal build. So yes, the tribe grew, but the smallest tribe in there was still at the bottom. So the selection was telling is I will take the thing that you all in the last chapters of Judges have kind of discarded. You pushed away. Y'all said it wasn't good enough. Remember, this is God's decision. This isn't Samuel's. This is God's decision. The smallest thing, the least value of the tribe, I want it. And I'm gonna raise it up for king. And I believe in Proverbs it said that I will raise a king basically from nothing. And he did it several times. But I want you to pay attention to the first king. Saul, smallest tribe, humble beginnings.
One more avenue is they were the smallest tribe, the humble beginning, but they also were mixed marriage because they had to go from out their family to bring others in there because they wouldn't let them marry among the tribes.
So now we have another factor. And the reason why thank you so much. The reason why all of these things are important because when we see the transition of the kings, and which we will see if you've been reading ahead, you know that Saul's not going to stay in reign for long. I think we only got him probably about another 3 or 4 chapters, as I say. Those some years. I mean, even when they talked about the years, they left it blank. And Saul reigned blank. He was this age blank. It's like, hey, It tells you eventually how long he reigned, but hey, this is how old he was. So we don't know. It's a lot of things, a lot of mysteries that we don't know about Saul, but we do know that Saul was from the smallest, the least valued amongst even them, because they talk about it in Judges. You want to go back and see how they talked about the Benjamites. I don't think that conversation's changed much until we get over into the Judges. Time may change, but the way it was looked at wasn't. So Saul being Saul, he was like, all right, it is what it is. This is the task. So Samuel tells him to go ahead, let your servant go ahead. And in the process of servant go ahead, Samuel has a conversation with Saul. And that conversation starts, it says, Samuel puts a flask on his head and he kissed him. And he said, is it not because God has anointed you leader over his inheritance? He is asking him. He has given him that same question back to him, but as a different question, saying, it is not about all the tribal lineages that you come from. Is it because God wants you here to take care of his inheritance? That's a pivotal question, because he's putting it back on Saul. It's not because you're the this, you're that. You're going to take over this role as the king is because God put you there. That's key, because Saul forgets that, right? Saul forgets all the things that should have been tacked into his mind, right? Deuteronomy, said that you should tack these things above your head. You should study them daily. Now, he wasn't a king yet, but this is the start of it. This is where that information should be on. And Samuel is a mentor to Saul. Like, it really, you only kind of see that tenderness of how Samuel really cared for Saul after Saul's fall. But that fall, prior to that fall, Samuel really loved Saul. The description of Saul was amazing. He's a tall man, beautiful, stood above the rest. Now,
Head and shoulders above the
rest. And it's very interesting that this is the description of the first king. Can somebody go to Isaiah 53:1 and just read that for me? I believe it's Isaiah 53:1.
53:1.
I'm reading out of
Mhm.
It says, who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed?
I must have got my notes mixed up. That's why he said,
I know you're looking
short pen is
for-
better than long memory. It is in Isaiah, but I believe it's when the description of Christ. In Isaiah, they give a description of Christ. They were very specific.
The Lord.
No, it's actual description. I have it. Can you see? That's why.
Right.
It's more so saying like he wasn't nothing to look upon. That's in it. Oh, so you just read. Was it? That's 50, it's
52, verse 2.
Okay.
53:2.
53:2. Okay, so I said 1, I meant 2.
Go ahead.
But he grew, I was at 53:2. But he grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of his parched ground, dry ground. He had no stately form or majesty that we should look upon him, no appearance that we should be attracted to him.
Completely different than Saul, right? First king versus last king. Completely different. Yet the magnification of what was done is 1,000 times better. But it was coming. I only point that out because we have to acknowledge that Saul was a beautiful man. The Bible was telling us that he was handsome.
So if Jesus showed up, they were looking for this stately man and became bloated.
And not only, I'm glad you said that, Alan, not only, it just shows you how superficial mankind can be, especially unsubmitted to God, right? They didn't even want Jesus to be their king, but they did. But they wanted him to be their king for their reason, so you can get rid of these Romans. They didn't want to submit to him from a standpoint of salvation. He's our savior. He's that type of king. We'll take you as our king as long as you do what we want you to do, which is get us from underneath this Roman oppression. But anything other than that, that sort of thing, the separation between both Saul and Christ.
It is that mindset. You have to,
Well, you get ready to talk about the mindset. The mindset of this, okay? One, they wanted a king which they had a king, but they wanted a king of their own making,
Mhm.
of their own part, their own description of or whatever. They were looking for the outside a part of the king, because the next king is said to the man after my own heart.
Right.
Okay, but they were looking at this. Their king would be someone that can stand above everybody else and be beautiful, and that's why Saul was appointed, because of what God said. Okay, you want that? We'll give you that.
Correct. And a man a man of my own heart part, that has a very to me, studying my scriptures had a very deep connotation of what it meant. What it meant. A man after my, it actually sent me down a road to look up the heart and the mind. Like, this just pumps blood. This in the Hebrew times was their heart. What they thought, what they believed is what it was. Now, mind you, while they are building this kingdomship, I want you to understand that the Philistines aren't just
Sitting around.
They're in fact, their towns are relatively close. That's why they warred all the time, because they were bordering neighbors, and they would fight all the time. So while they're building this king, the Philistines is just over there kind of watching them, and they're saying the same thing that people say about believers. Oh, whatever. They just a bunch of crazy people trying to get themselves organized. Look at this. Look what they believe, and it's no way it's going to work. Well, the Philistines would have knew what was coming about, but once again, the veil is there for anyone who is not in Israel. They don't know what God is working. They believe in all types of other stuff. They walk past the wind, they walk past a tree, and they drop down. We saw that in their beliefs with Dagon and their temples that they built. So as Saul leaves from Samuel tells him a few things. He tells him he's going to meet some men, and they're going to tell him, hey,
Prophets.
the donkeys have been recovered. Now, this is where the seer part comes in, because once again, he's telling him things that's going. This isn't to say that Saul had any doubt. But if I had to lean towards, I still need proof, Saul was it. When he walked away, Samuel knew that Saul would have to say, probably would ask him, well, how do I know it's going to be me? I've already questioned it, kind of telling you I'm the lowest tribe. How do I know it's going to be me? So he gave him some things that's going to happen. You're going to come across some men. They're going to tell you the donkeys have been recovered. They're going to offer you some bread, take it from their hand. He even told them where they would be, and the significance of where they would be is very important too.
Yep.
Because who was Benjamin's mother?
Rachel.
So everything, like we always hear, that nothing is wasted. So these men were hanging out. So this is Saul's land. So when he comes up, they offer the bread. And if you go to 1 Samuel 10:6, after the prophesizing, he comes up, and he said he's prophesizing, they're coming down. Now, this is why I said I want you to keep in mind where the people are traveling from. I'll start at 5. After that, they go to the hills of God, where the Philistines' watch post is. I want y'all to, it has to be understood that the turmoil that Israel is under, because you know how in the book of Judges, how they say, and Israel went on about. This is the going on about. These are the people that are in their land that are not supposed to be there. They're under bondage. We hear this story as if they're just moving around freely. No, they're under bondage building. This whole "we want a king" thing is because this is the cry. They just cried to the wrong person. Who did they cry out to before to get a judge? They cried out to God. Now they're saying we want a king. But their flaw, my benefit. That's it.
Just like Lamar was just saying with Jesus, they wanted to get out of the oppression.
When Jesus came, what did they say? Man, did you come here to defeat these Romans that's been kicking our butt? Right, did you come to do this for us? Did you? And he was like, I didn't come to build that type of king. I came to reveal to y'all the kingdom of God. And immediately everybody was like, what? Like we hit right here under Roman captivity, the same way they was under Philistine captivity. We're right here under Roman captivity. They telling us what you got. Go, please.
That's the film part. Let's look at the overarching.
Oh, we was gonna get there.
of it. We're in sin captivity. That's the main thing. Mankind, God wants to make sure, whether it's Old Testament, whether it's New Testament, whether it's kings, whether it's judges, whatever it is, mankind is without God is under bondage to sin, and only men don't even know what they don't know, because the spirit of, they can't. It's not spiritually discerned. but they'll only ask for what they want with the flesh. And God is like, you all need it. Every man stands underneath the judgment of God, and you can only get it through me. I might do it in different ways. But that's what it's pointing to, my son. Go ahead, Peter.
So the thing about what they wanted, and you know, I don't have all the answers when it comes to what they wanted, but I guarantee if Jesus would have came and said, let's load up, get the swords, get the knives, get all Israel, and let's go to war. The Pharisees and Sadducees wouldn't have had a problem with it because they still would have stayed in power. They still would have made political decisions. They would have looked at it and said, oh, Jesus is fighting for us. We just need to stay up here and make political decisions. They would have had a problem with it. But what he came to do was to abolish an idea that they had. You're not going to fight for us? Because that's what they got the first king for, to fight for them. They was getting beat up. They was getting mollywopped by the bully.
Physical man.
Right.
That's what they was after. So he can go out and fight another physical man king for them.
They wanted to see victory. They didn't want, they were having victory all the time, but they never saw it. They didn't know. They didn't know. In fact, we're going to even talk about a little bit more of how people are still veiled even when they reveal a king, just like people are still veiled even when we reveal a king. See, nothing is changing. It's all still relevant.
We know why he came. We have the ideal story. Well, we have the story with the veil lifted. We can say they should have known that he came for the very purpose to die, but they didn't know that, you know. So he's standing before them. Their sacrifice. They didn't see their sacrifice standing before them. We see it because we have the veil lifted. And you done mentioned veil 3 times, and I'm hoping they get it. And going through the story, they're still under the veil. You know, they don't see the full, they don't see this as they're going through with the veil lifted, that even when Jesus do come in Matthew, they still have the veil because he hadn't died, buried, and rose yet. The rest of the story has been told. And so when you say walk through the story with them, let's walk through the story with them.
With the veil down.
Yeah, but we know we can see the
Right.
other side of the veil. And we
See-
kind of see why they wanted the king and everything.
Because the veil itself was the sin in their life, was causing the veil.
They could not see God.
They could not see him.
They could not see God. They couldn't see past their own ambitions.
Mhm.
They couldn't see what had been right there from them from the days of old.
Had been revealed.
It-
Not that they tried to see him.
It hadn't been revealed.
Well, no. So look, and I'll say this. The metaphorical revealing hadn't happened, but a physical revealing happened, and they still ignored it. They still ignored a physical. Okay, so you remember what you just said. They wanted a physical king to go and win the war.
Physical king, yes.
They got a physical king. And it still say at the very end of the chapter that they heard that he was the king, and the children of Baal, which just means those that were of sin, those that were worshiping, those that were out there in the wild. They still said, we don't believe this. They showed him, hey, this is a king. We parade him in front of you. We brought him down here. They still didn't believe it. But let's continue on with Saul, Samuel, because man, I'm telling you, what you got.
No, I say you were in verse 6. It said, then the Spirit of the Lord will
Yep.
come upon you, and you will prophesy with them and be turned into another man.
All right, now I want y'all to keep that in mind, right? Because do you know none of what we just read has happened yet to Saul? He's telling him this. He's telling him everything that's going to happen, right? He's prophesizing. So none of this. So when you read this, sometimes people read the story and they think all of this stuff is currently happening. The new man, right? And remember what I told you, I went down a very deep well of this thing that beats in our chest provides us a new mind. All right. So he's already a new man. All right, you're a new man. Cool. But God did something for him after all of that. And it's in verse 9. So I'll read 6 and 9. I'll read 6 to 9 in chapter 10. And the Spirit of God shall come upon you, and you shall prophesy with them and be turned into another man. And it shall be when the signs come to you, do for yourself as you find, do for yourself as your hand find to do. for God is with you. And you shall go before Gilgal, and see, I am coming down to you to offer ascending offering and slaughterings of peace. Wait 7 days till I come. Then I shall make known to you what you shall do. It's just a whole lot of what shalls and do's. And it came to be, when he had turned his back from Samuel, that God gave him another heart. And all those signs came on that day. When he left Samuel, he was already changed. The other stuff that happened was more for Saul. Was confirmation. When we as believers come across someone and they listen, they hear, they receive. Now, they receive. Their heart has changed. Whether they go forward and deny it, the heart is, you've heard it. You've heard the message. It's not for me to force it on you. I can't make you change, but God will change your heart. Because who changed his heart now? Was it Samuel? Samuel had nothing to do with that. And the change of the heart was this. I'm just a Benjamite from the lowest tribe. I have nothing. I'm nobody. My tribe is the smallest. You know, is that? But when he walked away, and guess what his mind was? Guess what his new heart was? Anybody know what Samuel's new heart was? Saul's new heart was? When he walked away?
King.
I am a king. He walked away knowing that he was a king. Before that day, he had no heart to know that he was a king. Just like when we walk away and we affirm our faith, we walk away believers. Our heart is changed. The only thing we do now, if you deny that belief, is deny it in here. Where the heart comes. Now, yeah, I kind of get a little corny here for a minute. What makes your heart beat? Muscles? But what?
God makes your heart beat.
He's talking about physically.
Physically. What makes your heart beat?
Blood? Yeah. Not
Okay, Doc, come on.
This makes your heart
mind.
beat.
Your mind does.
Do you know how many things in here is just running on autopilot?
I think. No, I don't.
Right. There's so many things in here running on autopilot. So to change someone's mind that has so many things in it, you have to have a pretty solid message for them to believe it. Because this is where it is. You see people medically in a coma. Their brain is still, they say they don't got no brain function. Most of the stuff that's keeping them going is machines. I always say, cut it off, right? So this physical heart is in our body to pump blood, but this is the mind. This is what changes us. This is where we get immersed in that thought. So Saul was now immersed in the thought that he was a king. In fact, he left there doing kingly stuff, right? His reign started. He wasted no time. And it came to the hill, saw a group of prophets, did what you did. I'm just trying to get to my notes here because I don't want to rehash the whole thing. If I'm missing anything, please. Now, after Saul, Samuel comes down. He does what he needs to do, and he tells him, "Hey, you guys," and I'm reading from chapter 10, verse 19. Anything in between there and then did I miss? Did somebody might find that needs to be talked about? All right.
Well, one thing, verse 16, he talked to his uncle. He told him everything except one thing. Okay, when he's talking to his uncle, he told him everything except for the kingship.
The kingship. He told his uncle everything except for that one part.
Samuel told him except for the kingship.
And the reason why he didn't tell that one part, because it wasn't for him to tell.
Right.
If Saul would have came and said, "I declare myself king. I have the knowledge, I have the information, God has said it," what would have been the problem? We didn't hear from Samuel.
Right.
Samuel is still the judge of Israel. So why do you think Samuel, he said, "Hey, gather all the tribes. And we're going to do it like this till we get to a certain thing and you're going to go." But once again, somehow Saul was nowhere to be found.
No, he's out.
He's a king. I don't have to be at meetings. I know once I got to a certain point, I was like, "Well, I'm not going to those meetings." So Saul being a king, and I'm not saying that's why he missed the meeting, but he was in the stuff. It was a reason that he was hidden. But once he was discovered, they brought him in. And they brought him in, and once they brought him, it says, then he brought in near the tribe of Benjamin by their clan, and the clan was Matri, and it was taken, and then the son of Kish was taken. Saul, we break it all the way down. And they asked again of God, has the man come here yet? Because they're still looking for Saul. And God answered, he's hidden amongst the baggage, someplace, some some translation says stuff
Or equipment.
or equipment. So Saul was somewhere
Mine is this.
laying down. He could have been resting. He could have been doing anything. He had just got a whole lot of news. But then they said, all right, man, go get him. And they bring him in. And he stood in the midst of the people. And he was taller than any other people from the shoulders upward. Now, I could get into that too, because that took me down. Historically, people were short. So if Saul, let's say if Saul stretched 6 feet tall, 7 feet tall, he was almost a giant. It was tall. That's why when we hear the story of Goliath and Saul is saying that Goliath is big, Saul wasn't a little guy. That battle, and I'm warming up to where we're going to next. So I like to tell stories inside the story. But that battle, when Saul seen that, he said, man, these Philistines are big. But that was those two particular ones, the two brothers, Goliath and Goliath. I forgot his brother name, but they were the two biggest ones. But in all, because Saul had many victories over the Philistines. As we're getting ready to find out. Saul didn't have a problem with fighting those, but that day, and along with everything that's getting ready to transpire, you see that the hope that Saul had in victory when he first became king was not there when he needed it the most. Because David says something very, very important when he comes up there, but we'll talk about that when we get to King David. And so they ran and brought him here. And Samuel said to all the people, do you see him whom God has chosen? That there is no one like him among all the people? That was a question. Their answer was no. And all the people shouted and said, let the king live. Really? This is where we at. Let the king live. All right. So the people are screaming, let the king live. The praise that they used to reserve and just have for God, now they're giving it to a king. Very, very, very strange this transition is happening in this book, because we see the beginning. Well, and we've seen it throughout the scriptures. But we're really starting to see that the chosen people have now given that praise to Saul.
No, I like that expression. Says Samuel to people. They acknowledge that God chose Saul. Very important when looking at leadership is to know that leadership was chosen by God. You know, even today, I'm going to bring it to today. Your leaders, you know, those who preside and watch over your soul. It's important not to look at this as though you chose them. Now, we know it happens that way. But earlier on in the scriptures, it said that he would be over God's inheritance. You know, these people are God's inheritance. And God chooses leaders to preside over his inheritance. So even the leaders need to recognize they was chosen by the people or chosen by God. Because I'm going to tell you, it's not an office. Being a king, a leader of God's inheritance, the church, being a pastor, is not a light office. You know, and if he decided to put himself there, you see what I'm saying? These God's inheritance that you put yourself over. If he decides to say, the people put me here and go with that ideal, I'm a king because the people made me a king, Saul need to recognize that God made him the king. And the people need to recognize, that's what they did before the people. The people need to recognize that God has put this man there. But I think the perspective from the people to the king will be more honorable to God if they see it that way. Even if God put him there and they don't recognize that way, just to honor, they'll be honoring the king and not honoring God and honoring the king. Y'all see what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I
So
see.
even in the church today, your leaders, just like then, should be recognized that this is a God ordained office, not a people ordained office. Go ahead.
Oh, we was gonna get to that. I'm glad that was a perfect warm up, because everything that Saul's getting ready to do now is exactly what that spoke to. Now, notice what I didn't say what the people did, what Saul did. Saul was the one was supposed to be doing what he was supposed to do. People have been still the same people. He was there to Get them people to follow God. Do it the way God said, be here, do this. That's how we're going to do it. And as a king, you're going to listen to me. Now, we can't make it seem like the people didn't listen to every word Saul said, because we'll find out that later on when Saul said don't eat, guess what they didn't do? They didn't eat. So we know they'll listen to the voice of the king. But where did the fall come from? Was it the king? Was it the king's fall because the people didn't listen to him, or was it the king's fall because he listened to the people? We'll get to that. Or he feared the people not listening to him, I should say. So at the very end of 10, I'm going to read the last two, 26 and 27. And Saul went to his house. After being anointed king, he goes into his house, and he met with and with him went brave men whose heart God had touched. So in that day, not only was Saul's heart changed, but because who Saul was, God touched other hearts around, changed other minds, that this is the king, except for a small group. And that small group stood up, and it says, but the sons of Baal said, what does this one save us? And they despised him and brought him no presents, but kept silent. So all the other people, when they heard about it, they paid tribute, which lets you know, who are these people? Children of who? And where are they at? They're in a meeting with Israel. Like, let you know when James talks about false prophets coming into the church. We see them. They've been here. They've been here since the beginning of the story. They didn't just creep in. The false prophet was the one who slid from the tree and told them a false prophecy. The serpent told them a false prophecy. So we see it. It's been there. So now we see that it's people here who are right in the middle of Israel, and they're in there. They're in a meeting. Can you imagine having somebody in a meeting that is not what's properly that is with you, but not with the plan going forward to save you? That's a big statement right there, where they say, but the sons of Bela did, what does this one save us? And they despised him and brought him no presents, but kept silent. Do we not see that same thing happening to us today? As Christians, you tell people, I'm not taking on Christ. I ain't going to church. I ain't doing all this. They despise him. Whether they want to admit that or not, the same way that they despise this king, people still despise our king to this day. Now, it's funny. I know certain go ahead.
In verse 26, see that Saul also went to his house, and Giver and the valiant men whose heart God
had touched.
Went with him. In other words, the people they just didn't say, hey, okay, Saul is our king. And God put a king in place. The king knew it. But God just didn't leave it to the people to guess it. You know, God touched their heart to where it would be a divine notification that Saul is our king that God had gave us. It's not a whimsical thing. Well, you know, sometimes we'll be flipping with our king, sometimes we won't. No. They knew because God revealed to them that this is your king that I've given you. This is your leader. This is your pastor. This is your teacher. This is your deacon that I have given you locally here. Just kind of bringing it home so we can see both sides. We got to build it. We can do that. You know. So, good.
So small little history about even the Amorite king. His name is Nahash, right? Nahash just means serpent, right? So first thing the king has to go up against is a serpent, right? Tells them go in here. The Amorites are they're in trouble. They're in trouble. And the first thing they say is, man, you know, we got some problems here. So if you make a covenant with us, we'll serve you. But give us some time because we might have some reinforcements and then we might not serve you. So you can see how they were wishy-washy in their intentions. But when Saul heard this, right? When he heard this, I want to point this out because this is still a continuation of how God has his judge, God has his king. Still the same principle of where the power comes from. So after Saul hears about the people and they said, you know, why are they weeping? He asked them the question, what's going on in Yabesh? And they said, well, we're being just like y'all. We're being persecuted. We're being beat down. And if you're willing to help us, we might join your team. And it says right here, and particularly in 11:6, the Spirit of God came upon Saul mightily as he heard this word, and his displeasure burned greatly. And he took the yoke of the cattle and cut it into pieces and sent them throughout the border of Israel by the hands of the messenger, saying, whoever does not go out with Saul and Samuel, now notice he ain't going out by himself, Saul and Samuel to battle, let them do this cattle. And the people of God fell on and the fear of God fell on the people, and they came out as one man. Now they go in there and they do what they have to do. They beat the Amorites. The men of Yabesh say, hey, you know what? We got you. We're gonna come out, we're gonna do what we need to do. After the victory, I'm gonna go down to 12. Is there anything else anybody want to pull out in that excerpt? All right. Now, after that battle, you have to think. Saul sent out this all to the land. First decree as a king is the first thing that Samuel said he's going to do. He's going to require your men and your family to come out and fight.
Mhm.
So this is already the first thing as a king. He's already telling them, it's a battle over there. If you don't come out and fight, all them oxen that I sent to y'all will be you next. So what do you think of that type of leader? Is it a fear tactic? No, it's what a king would do. I got to fight. You, my people, come on outside. You have nothing to say about it. If not, meet your demise. I mean, if I'm mistranslated or miss.
No, you're not mistranslating. I mean, God told him exactly, and Samuel told him exactly what was going to happen.
What was going to happen?
This is what's going to happen, and it's happening.
Now, I don't believe these, because I'm at 11:12. I don't believe these were people of Baal, because I think they were off on their own thing. These are the people of Israel that is asking this question. And the people, they didn't say it to Saul, because guess what? Saul has made that decree. We're starting to see that Saul's voice has power throughout Israel. They're not going to ask Saul. They're going to go to the person that has been there for right ruling judgment, and that's Samuel. And they go to Samuel. Who says Saul shall reign over us? Y'all did. That would have been my reply. Y'all did. I told y'all. You didn't want to listen. Bring the men so that we may put them to death. You want to start right here? Like y'all already here. Y'all all present and accounted for. But Saul said, no man shall be put to death, for today God has wrought deliverance in Israel. Hey, we're here. Salvation is here. Nobody's going to die today. I'm not going to kill you, even though y'all are going against the king. Because you notice who said nobody's going to die. Because if they'd have left that up to, if you notice, Samuel didn't answer the question. I think if they'd have left that answer up to Samuel, and we know the type of person Samuel was, Samuel would have probably said,
Wipe them out.
He would say, oh yeah, give me a second. He would have grabbed his sword, because Samuel was not without a sword, and he would have slew them on the spot, because that's what they asked for. What you got?
When Samuel said that Saul would be king, he wrote in the book the rules of how to treat royalty, but yet they still question.
Well, and I say this, not to come down on Israel. Look how they treated God.
Yes.
I mean, they would pray, and some people who pray and get what they want, and then they still got questions. They still ask God, like, God, why? That's the same question. Can't be satisfied. And it's places in Proverbs that talk about them not being satisfied. God asked me, am I not enough? Didn't I lead you out of Egypt? Didn't I bring you through the wilderness by night? Didn't I bring you? Like, it's a constant reminder of.
What have you done for me lately?
Gave you a king. I mean, it never stops. It never stops. So
The only people.
Well, that's called them. You got it. What is it called, Mr. Leader? One more time for the people in the back.
That's why it's called depravity.
Because you don't know how much you actually need that until you see this, or it's revealed to you. You'll be just like them. You'll get what you want, win the fights, and still complain. All right. Man, did I go ahead? All right. So after the victory, Saul saves lives, Samuel said to the people, come on, let's go to Gilgal and renew the reign right there. Let's just go up there and get this taken care of so it's over and done with. And the people went to Gilgal, and there they set up Saul to reign before Gilgal. And they made a slaughter and the offers unto God, and they rejoiced. And the men of Israel were happy. They were some happy people because now it's finally the culmination of what they want. We got what we needed. We asked for this king. We know that he's qualified to win battles. This is our guy. This is it. I mean, we can't get nobody better than Saul.
Confirmation here. But God made him king, but they basically got a confirmation there that he is king.
Yep.
Some manuscripts might say they made him king, but actually it was like a confirmation. Because he was a king before they did that.
He was a king the day his heart changed. All right. So this chapter is part of this chapter is Samuel's farewell. All right. Samuel's like, look, I've judged y'all wisely. Y'all got y'all king now. I'm just gonna, kind of be back in it as an advisor. All right. But the first thing Samuel wanted to do is this. Samuel wanted to make sure that their decision was understood, like truly understood. And the first thing Samuel did to make sure that their decision was truly understood was what?
You talking verse 1 and verse 12, chapter 12?
We could get, I mean, that whole.
Yeah, well, the
however
first
you
thing
want.
it says that now Samuel said to all Israel, indeed, I have heeded your voice and all that you said to me, and have made a king over you. And then, like you said, he starts running down
So
what's going on.
and I say that because when Samuel wanted to make sure that they understood what they asked for, Samuel didn't say, well, this is what you asked for. These are the things you asked. He said,
No.
first and foremost, examine me.
Yes.
Don't examine anybody else because y'all want a king, but I want to make sure that not only do you trust me, you trust the words that's coming out of my mouth. Examine me. Now, as believers, sometimes we don't get examined properly. A lot of it could be on our own. It could be things we say, do. We don't get examined properly. But Samuel made sure that and I say that because delivering a word is important to make sure that we get examined properly. Have I robbed? Have I lied? Have I stole? Have I did this? Have I did that? Because the people are looking at him, and he said, and if your answer is yes to any of that, then we'll fix it. But their answer was what? No, Samuel, you never wrong. Then accept your king.
Mm-hmm.
Accept your king and talk to me no more about it. I'm done.
Don't bring it up again.
I'm blameless. When this goes bad, I'm blameless. Now the people are saying, Samuel, no, Samuel, it can't be like that. Don't stop praying for us. And Samuel said, far be it for me to sin and stop praying for you. Now later on, Jesus said to do what for your enemies? Pray for them. I don't think Samuel looked at them as enemy. I know he looked at them as brothers, but at that point, when you ask for somebody outside of God, I think Samuel probably took high offense to that, especially being able to commune with God, to hear the word of God. So Samuel said, look, I'm not going to stop praying for y'all. Far be it from that. I'm going to keep doing what I'm supposed to do. But as far as y'all got to go to your king from here on out. Can't come to me. You didn't trust my wisdom. You didn't trust my God. You didn't trust God. Forget Samuel. You didn't trust God. I was just his voice. And so it's going to come back. All right. So, and that particular sentence where Samuel was saying, if y'all want me to pull other things out, I have a lot of things highlighted. I'm just condensing them. The people themselves acknowledge their sin in this chapter. If you go to 10, and they cried out to God and said, we have sinned because we have forsaken God and served Baal and the Asherah. Remember, these people were still in the land doing these things. So of course they are seeing how they're acting and serving how they and want a king. Because they're establishing all these different temples and different things in the wilderness to be praised. And we're not doing that. We're getting beaten and oppressed. Where's our temples? Where's all this? Because the very first thing the next king did was build what? A great city and a great temple. So these are the things that they're seeing. Because remember, the house of Dagon wasn't shabby, right? They took spoils. When they won wars, when the Philistines took spoils, they took gold. They took stuff. So these things weren't built up. So they got to see all those and they wanted it. But they knew they had sinned. But it was too late. And now deliver us from the hands of our enemy, and we serve you. And Jerubbaal, and they start talking about the other judges that came along and did the same thing. If you go to 14, Now they're the sovereigns whom you have chosen, whom I asked, and see, God has set a sovereign on you. If you fear God, you shall serve and obey him and not rebel against his command, against the commands of God. Then both of you and your sovereign who reigns over you shall follow in the Lord your God. I'm having trouble translating here because I'm reading from my text. So I'm trying to translate the things and Sam at the same time. But right then and there is our decree as believers, right? If you fear God, the fear of the Lord leads to wisdom and understanding. If you fear God, you shall serve him and obey his voice. Who is the him? Whose voice? Who is that for us? Because remember, this is a king. He's telling him to serve and obey somebody's voice, the king's voice. If you fear God, you shall serve and obey his voice and not rebel against the command of God. And both you and the sovereign who reign shall follow your Lord your God. In other words, this is your king. This is the person y'all picked. Hear me, because what I'm saying through him. The rain is coming through me, is from me to him. Listen to him. If you don't, your kingdom will be destroyed. Now remember, it's twofold. It's the people and the king. But the king is the one that has to be the voice. He's the one that God is going to punish, because we see that coming up.
I think the king that God has put before them is an outward expression of them fearing God. I always tell people all the time when I get phone calls from people where they have issues with their pastor. And sometimes they just get kind of, I can see the frustration. But one of the things I caution, and these are my friends, and I don't know their pastors, most of them. I say, be careful with your pastor, because while you think you're fighting against your pastor, you'll find yourself fighting against God. And that's what they mean by fear of the Lord. If they fight against Saul, they're actually fighting against God. So if they're fighting against Saul, they're not showing the fear for the Lord. That's what you God.
He was anointed. The oil touched his head. What you got?
Just in addition to that, I like the spiritual connotation. Of course, when it comes to God's people, I'm always thinking about the church, God's elect first, right? But also think about the earth. People come to me about our president. Same thing. They think the decisions that he's making, oh, he's wrong for this, he's wrong for that. If they're not believers, then I have a different conversation with them. But if they're a believer and you're bashing the president, you don't understand that he's not there in and of his own installation. It wasn't about the votes you saw on Fox News, right? It was God who put him there. And if you don't like the decisions, you have to check out Romans, which says, I put him there to do a couple of things. Sometimes a nation is prosper, right? Some is punishment. And either way, as believers, we know God's gonna protect us in the midst of a decaying nation, sin-wise. So even with that, I like the pastor thing, that's the truth. You know, if God says obey those who rule over you, he's talking about presidents and kings, you know that's even doubly important when it comes to the body of Christ.
That was number 13, you came from Christian support.
Yeah, Romans 13, 1 through 7, okay?
Right, they come back to the president like,
Look at all the pastors joining
don't
forces.
matter about that. They ask me, but do you like,
Hebrews 13.
Biden, like Trump? That's not for me to even converse about.
Yeah, and I just share that because sometimes we
I get a
can,
free round.
something can be really wrong, even though our leaders can be wrong.
Right.
Okay, there's still an honor, because he said that these presidents are the leaders and kings bear the sword for those who do wrong. You know, so for us, if we don't do wrong, then there's no worry.
Thank you so much, Pastor Allen, Pastor Mari. It was CJ. Oh, Pastor BJ. He slid one in too. Thank y'all for that intermission. I can catch up on my notes. No, but well said. Well said. Because any disrespect for the king is is a blatant disrespect for God.
Mm.
I mean, and the reason why I'm glad that it's so tied into the New Testament is because we need to see that. We need to see the seriousness that the Israelites, when they talked about the coming king, how their mindset was when they was walking around when Jesus was there. But their hearts were. Their hearts were, this guy is coming to battle. We've been talking about this Messiah for a long time. It was a dark period. They in that dark period, the rest of the world start going to other gods because they didn't have a voice. But the Israelites who remained faithful was exactly what they were there to do, to be God's inheritance, to be a reminder for the world in a time when Jesus came, so that message continue to go on for the entire world of believers. That's what they have always been the children of promise, because they will always remind the world of God. Now that Christ is here, the voice is even louder, and it's just not one nation, it's all nations. All right. So Saul is the king. All right, and I'll wrap it up after this chapter. All right, Saul is the king. All right, now Saul is the king, and Saul's already got we got a battle on his side, and the Philistines is around him, and they're all different ports and different places. And Saul says, you know what? I think it's time to go get these Philistines out of my backyard. I think it's time to clean house. Now, the bad part is the Israelites was like, no, we're not fighters. We don't have swords and knives and all this stuff. That's not us. So they begin to hide in the mountains. They were hiding. And the king is saying, let's go out and get victory. Now, Samuel did tell Saul to do something, right? Samuel's good at telling people to wait. How many days? 7 days.
7 days.
Saul, wait for me. In 7 days, I'm coming. Now, we're going to win this battle. All you have to do is wait. Because at the end of the day, why are they waiting for Samuel to come?
So you do sacrifice.
We can do the sacrifice. Because who does the sacrifice?
Priest.
The priest. But what does Saul decide he want to do as the king?
He said he couldn't wait for him. He got tired. People were starting to disperse, so he decided, I'm going to.
Man, I came out here to win this war.
Mm-hmm.
If people are running and hiding, I better do something to appease God. Maybe I'll make this peace offering. Somebody bring me a young ox and bring me something. I need to sacrifice something. And he did it. And as soon as he did it, who comes over the hill?
Samuel.
Hey, what you do? Oh man, everybody was running and they didn't want to stick around. So yeah, I made a sacrifice. Now, I have always been taught that Saul lost his anointing when he didn't kill King Ammon, right? Is it not Ammon? The king of the Amorites. Can't remember his name offhand. But that's where I've always heard this. That's where Saul lost his anointing. Nope. Saul lost his anointing this day.
Right.
And he still went on and did things for the Lord. But his anointing that was tore from him was not the anointing of being a chosen person. The reign of heaven had been taken from Saul. Now, y'all hear I say the reign of heaven, right? Because if you think about Saul's origin, now I'm always one of the ones, this is in a mindset of what's on the other side of the coin? What could have been? You know, it didn't happen. What could have been? From the smallest tribe of the Benjamites, the smallest tribe, the tribe that nobody's looked at, there's nothing, we would have got a king that would, the history and the lineage would have been a miraculous story. Now, this is us having a veil, so we know that miraculous story didn't happen. It was a better story. But think about it, coming from the smallest tribe and keeping the lineage in line and Israel walking straight and they're with God, man, this whole world would have been a beautiful place. But we didn't get that. We got Saul. Disobedient. Hard-headed. Wanting things done his way. So what did Saul do? He did it his way. And Samuel came up and said, hey, man, what you doing? He said, I'm just making a sacrifice. I didn't tell you to do that. And Samuel says, you have been foolish. And this is 11:13. You have been foolish to not guard the command of the Lord your God, which he commanded you. For now, the Lord will have, for God would have established your reign over Israel forever. Forever. Like, not tomorrow, not while you are a king, not when you die, but forever. The same promise he made to David. Same thing he was going to give to David, he was going to give to Saul. Saul didn't wait long. He messed that up pretty quick. And that disobedience spawned to his son. And we'll talk about that more in the next chapter. And as I close out this chapter, it's something very important we'll get into more. And it's to keep in mind that when they did finally muster up the courage after Samuel came and the Philistine camp was there, they specifically say that there were no blacksmiths in Israel. None. But they grabbed up their plowshares and everything else. And who was the only two that had swords and knives? I mean, swords. The king and his son. And that goes back to what did the law of Moses was written, because that's the law they was under. If you do what by the sword? I ain't even have to finish it. So we see that Saul's downfall for his even the way he was going to die was already dictated in chapter 13. Are there any questions, comments, concerns? I was going to say about the thing that I was trying to give earlier was about Nahash being a serpent. That was the original name in the Hebrew text. They called the serpent's name was Nahash. So a lot of times the kings, they would name they would have those names going throughout generations to actually be a spurn to Israel. Why not name something that you're like the people of the times of the Philistines and the Amorites? They weren't ignorant to Yahweh. Like we seen that. What was her name? Rachel? Not Rachel. I'm drawing a blank here. Might have been Rachel. Who was and Raquel? Rahab. There we go. We seen that with her, right? She knew the story of the coming of God, and she knew everything that he was capable of. She was saved. So these people aren't oblivious to what's going on around them. They just don't want to do it. Any questions? They do, and we'll get to that too. The Pharisees, they quoted all types of stuff from the law of Moses. Any questions? All right.